Hello and welcome to the third lesson of Intro to Programming in Scratch by Codivate. Today we're going to be learning about how to read code and figure out what the code does just by looking at the program itself and not watching it run. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to look at some real-world examples, and then after that we're going to look at Scratch and just practice reading Scratch blocks and figuring out what they do. So, let's get started. Basically, the way you figure out what a program does just by looking at the code, in general, this isn't specific to Scratch, is you basically have to look at what are essentially clues to figure out what the program is doing. So, you generally won't be able to just look at a piece of code and say, oh, it does this immediately, just by glancing at it. You'll have to look at specific parts of the code and think, okay, why is this here? What does that mean? Or why is that here? And that might sound really abstract, and it is. I'll show you some concrete examples right here. So, for example, this set of instructions, which is what a program is, this we can look at and figure out what it's actually doing, because I didn't tell you what it's actually doing. They read, boil 1 cup of macaroni in 1 cup of water for 5 minutes. Separate the water from the macaroni and put it in a bowl. Then mix 1/2 cups of cheese with that macaroni. That's it. Now, we want to figure out what this does. And it might not be obvious, it might also be obvious depending on what you paid attention to. And the way you can think about this is there are some key words here. For example, macaroni, cheese, water, boiling. Clearly, since we're boiling things and mixing things and separating things, this is a recipe of some kind. And I gave you a little hint here with the picture. And not only is it a recipe of some kind, but we can also deduce what kind of recipe it is. And we can tell that it's something to do with macaroni and cheese. And the only thing that we know of that has macaroni and cheese it's just mac and cheese. So that's how you do it. You need to find the keywords, and if that's not enough, just run through the code. Like, run through it yourself. Just think, if you imagine yourself doing these things, what would you end up with if you actually boiled macaroni and then mixed it with cheese? What would you end up with if you actually did that? That's another way to think about it. Another example is this. What is this program going to do? 1. Rub the dish with soapy water until there are no dirty spots left. 2. Put the dish on the drying rack. 3. Repeat for each dish in the sink. Okay, the keywords here are soapy water, dish, sink, drying rack, things like that. And if we think about it, what would happen if I rubbed a dish with soapy water? What happens to dishes when you rub them with soapy water? The answer is they get clean when that happens. In fact, it tells you until there are no dirty spots left. That tells you that it's clean. Next thing, you put it on the drying rack. Well, okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. You put it on the drying rack. And then you keep repeating that until all the dishes are done. Now, we know from personal experience that doing the dishes by hand requires you to wash them with soapy water and then put them on the drying rack. So, this matches that thing we already know how to do. So, we can figure out that this is definitely washing dishes. Next one, this is the last one, is take one lace, cross it over the other, make bunny ears with the laces, and then cross those bunny ears over each other. Repeat on the other shoe. Keywords here are shoe, lace, crossover, and bunny ears. Now, if you imagine yourself doing these things, if I took one lace, now, when I say lace, that probably confuses you a little bit, because what lace? Where are you getting this lace from? And if you look down here at shoe, you can kind of tell that the lace is coming from the shoe. It's a shoelace that I'm talking about. So you take it and you cross it over the other shoelace, and then you do all that stuff, those weird things with bunny ears. And if you've already learned how to tie your shoes, you'll recognize that this is how you tie shoes. And that's all it is. This code just tells you how to tie your shoes. And we were able to figure that out by going through each step, imagining what would happen if we actually did those things, and looking at specific key parts of the code that give us hints. Alright, now we're going to move on to Scratch. And we're going to do the exact same thing I just did with 3 real world things, and just do it in Scratch. So, what will the sprite cat do when we click this green flag here? You can pause the video, try to figure it out. Some hints I would give you are simplify the problem. There are blocks here that don't matter. For example, the wait blocks. They don't matter at all. They just pause for a second. And the when green flag clicked block also doesn't really matter, because that's just what starts it. It doesn't actually do anything on its own. So really, we're only looking at those 3 blue blocks. So just think about, we know what each of those 3 blue blocks does by themselves. We learned that in the previous class. So we just have to think of what would happen if you did those 3 things one after another. So you would just move 30 steps forward. Now, forward is just whatever direction the cat is facing. We don't know where it's facing, but we're just going to assume that it starts in the middle facing to the right, where it starts when you first open up the Scratch app. So it's going to move 30 steps to the right, then it's going to turn to the right 90 degrees. So it's going to change from looking right to looking down, because that's a quarter circle turn. And then it's going to move again 30 steps. This time the 30 steps are down instead of right, because the cat just turned to face down. And that's pretty much it. This is what it looks like. Moved right, turned, moved down, just like that. Next example is much longer, but isn't that much harder to understand. Again, you can pause it now and think of it. Hints are simplify it. Take out all the wait blocks, take out the when green flag clicked. Just look at those blue blocks, because they're the only blocks that do things. Try to figure out what each block is doing by itself. And we already know what each block is doing. Point in direction 90 means point to the right, and point in direction -90 means point to the left. And the move will just move the cat in the direction it's pointing. So we can figure out that if we just run through this code one by one, the cat's going to point to the right first, then it's going to move 30 steps. That's also to the right, because it's in the same direction. And then the cat is going to point to the left, so it's going to turn around. And then it's going to move another 30 steps. And again, that 30 steps, this one, it's going to be to the left. So it's going to move right, then it's going to move left, and then it's going to point back to the right, but not move. So it will end up just going right, left, and then back where it started. And that's just an example. Okay, so if you look at it, the cat moves back, turns around. Click it again, moves forward, turns, just like that. Next one. This one has a look block, say hello. This one's slightly more complicated, mainly because of that last block. Try it for yourself. Again, take away the orange blocks, they don't really matter here. It's just say hello, move 30 steps, and then glide. And we know what each of those do by themselves. Say hello literally just says hello. It's self-explanatory. It just puts a speech bubble on the cat. That's all it does. After the cat says hello, it's going to move 30 steps. We don't know what direction it's going to move, because we don't know what direction it's facing right now, but we're just going to assume it's to the right. So it'll move 30 steps right. Then, after it moves 30 steps, it's going to glide to this position. And if you remember from previous classes, we had coordinate planes, and we learned that the first number is how far to the right or left we're going, and the second number is how far up and down. So this 166.19 means if you start from the middle, you'd go 166 to the right and then 19 up. So that's where that point is. So the cat, wherever the cat is on the screen, it's going to smoothly go to that point, this 166.19 point. So that's what's going to happen. It's going to say hello, it's going to move, and then it's going to glide to that position. So if you look, cat starts here, says hello, moves 30 steps, then glides to that position. Note that the position was right here. It does it again. The cat does it again in a different spot, but then glides back to the same position. So note that regardless of where the cat started from, it ends up in that same position because it's still 166.19. That number doesn't change each time. So the cat just goes to that exact spot at the end whenever you run this code. And that's important to understand, that it always ends in the same spot. Right. Next one. Figure out what this does. Those were 3 examples that I walked through. Now we have some exercises. If you were in person doing this, this would be exactly the same as a example, except I would make you do it instead of do it in front of you. But since you're just watching a video, this is just going to be me doing examples. So we have go to x100, y0, say this phrase, point to the right, and then glide to this point. Now, what that's going to do is going to do this. He says I'm going to do the moonwalk. He glides to 0, 0. That's it. Now, this point in direction 90 just made sure that the cat was pointing to the right. In this example, the cat was already facing to the right, so it didn't change. It changed from pointing to the right to pointing to the right again, so you didn't see any change there. Next one is point direction 90, say you're going to do a backflip, turn to the left 90 degrees, turn counterclockwise 90 degrees, and then do turn again, and then say ouch. Now what that's going to look like is this. Point direction 90, turn, turn, say ouch. Exactly as I said. So this means point to the right, then it's going to say something, then it's going to turn twice. Now, when you turn, again, it's quarter circle turn. So this cat did a quarter circle turn twice and ended up on its head. And then it said ouch. That's pretty much it. The important thing is to pause the video and try these on your own before I just show you the answer. Next one. Very similar to the first one. Move 30 steps, turn counterclockwise 90, move 30 steps again. And it just looks like this. Move, turn, move. Easiest way to think about this is to just walk through the blocks one by one and just pretend that you were running it yourself. Next thing, very similar. What I want you to try to guess is how is it different from the other one we just looked at. And the way it's different is it's still move 30, turn, and move 30. The only differences are that the turn is in the other direction and the weight blocks are faster. So this cat moves a little bit faster and it turns in the other direction. This one is also similar to the previous one, but it's a little tricky in how it's different, and I want you to try to figure out how it's different. Because it is almost exactly the same until the very end. And why that is change x by 30 means the cat will just move 30 steps to the right, regardless of what direction it's facing. Then it's going to turn clockwise 90 degrees. And then it's going to, again, move to the right by 30 steps. Now, that's different because previously the cat turned and then moved in the direction that it turned. Now, in this example, we're going to move, turn, and then keep moving to the right, even though they turned. That's the main difference. And that's why these change x's are different than the move blocks. Next one. This is almost exactly the same as the previous one, except it says change y by 30 instead of change x by 30. And if you remember, Y means the vertical and X means the horizontal. So you could guess that this is almost exactly the same as the previous one, except the cat moves up instead of to the right, just like this. And that is all for this lesson. Thank you for watching.